はい、先生、それで
は、
はいになりましたので、お願いいたします。
はい、OK。よろしくお願いします。Professor Schumacher, maybe you can turn on your video and just keep mute. I will have the introduction. Okay, so welcome today to the 83rd Brownback seminar at QL's Kyushu University. Yes, it's like the first BBS in February, and actually in January we have this New Year seasons over the world. And I'm originally from China, so I always think I'm lucky because every year I can spend 2 New Years in Japan. Because the first New Year is a normal New Year, and second one is the Lunar New Year. So actually, the Lunar New Year was this year is scheduled in late January, I think. So I spent a long time, like one month, to enjoy the happy holidays, but working. So as foreigners in Japan, sometimes you feel very good because we have a lot of new experience in this different country, but sometimes you feel a little homesick. And today I want to introduce another foreigner faculty members at QLS. I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Kim Schumacher because he just came to QLS from last August. And actually, we didn't speak too much, I think, but this is a very good chance to know about him. And let me, please allow me to introduce Professor Kim Schumacher. He hails from Luxembourg and recently joined Kyushu University from last August as an associate professor. Prior to this, he served as a lecturer and research fellow in sustainable finance and ESG at Tokyo Institute of Technology. Professor Schumacher is also an honorary research associate at the University of Oxford. He has a wealth of experience in the field, having previously provided consulting service to the Luxembourg Ministry of the Environment, Climate, and Sustainable Development, and conducted research as a postdoc researcher in sustainable finance and the University of Oxford. He also held adjunct lecture positions at the University of Luxembourg and the United Nations University in Tokyo. Today, he will give us a talk titled The Impact of Greenwashing. It's about greenwashing and competence greenwashing on sustainable finance and ESG investing. Professor Schumacher can speak Japanese well, but today he will give us this speech in English. So Professor Schumacher, you can start your screen sharing and give us the talk.
Can everyone see my
screen? No problem.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Sensei. But yeah, my Japanese is not that good. So that is one of the reasons why today I will provide my presentation also in English. However, for those who are Japanese, if you do have at the end, if you do have questions, please do not hesitate to ask them in Japanese as well. As someone will help me translate them, and then hopefully I can provide an answer. So, but without further ado, I want to talk a little bit about the impacts of greenwashing and competence greenwashing on sustainable finance and ESG investing. So we already went through the biography, so I will go straight to what actually is, what do we understand under the term greenwashing. And for that, I first need to provide a little bit of context, specifically in the areas of sustainable finance and ESG investing, or as it is also called, sustainable investing. And with this graph, all that you need to know is that the number of sustainable funds, or also in the finance sector, it has been growing steadily. It has been growing exponentially between 2010 and 2020, especially in Europe, to a lesser degree in the United States, but also recently in Japan. It has become very common to see financial institutions promote sustainable investing. And that is one of the key elements why I later will make the link to greenwashing. Because what do we understand even under sustainable investing? There's this term ESG, and it stands for environmental, social, and governance. And those are kind of metrics, factors that investors, but also companies should or will now consider more and more when making investment decisions or business decisions. So that can include under environment, greenhouse gas emissions, especially carbon emissions, so CO2. Then under social, during the COVID crisis, health and safety, working conditions, but also diversity became very important. And then under governance, it is especially board diversity, or for example, transparency at the company level, for example, corruption. Those are some of the things that matter a lot. So these are some of the aspects that are now being considered when making decisions in the investment space, and also to look at the performance of companies. So investors will look at how do companies perform in these areas, and are there any risks or opportunities that come with good performance, or are there any risks that are linked to bad performance? So if a company has very high carbon emissions and is not doing a lot to reduce them, is that a risk? So then we get to greenwashing, and here's an important definition. It's by the ISO 14100 standard, which is called Guidance on Environmental Criteria for Projects, Assets, and Activities to Support the Development of Green Finance. And I will just read literally the definition, because I was lucky enough to write that very definition, because I'm also a member in the technical committee of ISO that is responsible for this standard. So, and that standard has been approved by the governments. So this is now one of the definitions for greenwashing that has broad international support. So greenwashing in the finance space is an increasingly relevant issue that affects the financing of green projects, assets, and activities. Greenwashing was first coined as a term to address the intentional or unintentional misrepresentation, overstating of positive impacts, understating of negative impacts, or making false claims about a company's products or services regarding environmental aspects. So these same challenges are affecting also the financial sector and financial products, which can include false, vague, or misleading, or overly optimistic or unverifiable claims, such as unsubstantiated or unverified data, the validity of green performance credentials, the capacity to manage sustainability-related risks, or what I will also go later more into is the sustainability-related expertise or capacities, so misrepresentation of sustainability-related expertise or capacities, and then also the degree of beneficial or positive impacts of business activities or financial activities, or the degree of adverse negative impacts of business activities or financial activities. So that means if it's positive, usually inflating or exaggerating the positive impacts, or omitting or downplaying the negative impacts. And this is where really greenwashing comes into play. It is a mismatch between claims and expectations and capacities and evidence. So what do I mean by that? So if a company or an investor makes ESG related claims or sustainability related claims and says, for example, our product helps to save the environment or helps to reduce carbon emissions. By doing that, by saying that, they also then need to provide evidence that they are capable of doing that, and also evidence reliable data to prove that they either did it or again show that they have the capacities to do that, what they claim to do. And then on the other hand, it is also when I make claims, for example, I say an institution says we have a lot of experts in the areas of climate change or biodiversity, then the word expert creates expectations. And with that, with those expectations, clients or customers will think, oh, that company has proper resources to do what they say they want to do. But if it then comes out that, like, very few of the people that are being called experts actually do have genuine and relevant expertise, then that is also like, greenwashing or competence greenwashing, because you create expectations and you do not have the capacities or you do not have the evidence to prove that you can carry out what you say you want to do. That is like me saying, oh, I have a football team or a soccer team that can win the World Cup. And then it comes out that all the players that I recruited have only been playing soccer for a week. That is, if I say my team can win the World Cup, I create expectations. But if it comes out that I do not have the capacities to do that, then it would be false advertising. It would be misleading to make that claim. And that is where greenwashing also comes. Like, you make claims or you create expectations that you cannot prove or that you do not have the resources for. So, for example, instances of greenwashing in Europe. So these instances that I just described, they're becoming extremely common, or like, there's a lot of instances that are now occurring in recent times, like, in Europe, and that is also why the EU, the European Union, now wants to fight against greenwashing, because sometimes companies, but also financial institutions, have been creating these expectations or have made claims. And then it came out that they do not have the evidence or the data to prove that they can do what they say they want to do or what they say they have done. One example, a very common example, a very important example recently is DWS, which is the asset management branch of Deutsche Bank, a very large financial institution based out of Germany. And they are now being investigated by European and by American regulators because they have been making claims about, like, sustainable investment products, like what is called sustainable funds or green funds, by saying, like, that if you invest with them, if you do give them their money, DWS will invest it in, for example, companies that reduce carbon emissions or that help slow down deforestation. However, DWS created all these products, but they did first not have the people, the necessary human resources. And also the people that they did have, they did not have the sufficient expertise to, like, even properly monitor any of these, like, indicators, like, for example, reduction of carbon emissions or slowing down of deforestation. So it was a misadvertising because people thought, if I invest with DWS, my money can create financial returns, but it also can help, like, mitigate climate change, or it can help slow down deforestation. And that had very concrete consequences, because the CEO, or would I say ex-CEO of DWS, had to resign because of these claims. So it shows very clearly that you cannot just make all of, like, create products or services that promise a lot of environmental benefits or sustainability benefits, but you do not need to provide any evidence to prove that there is any benefit. And that is one of the key things that greenwashing now in the financial sector has, like, caught the attention of regulators and of governments, because it is becoming a real issue. Because if all the investors claim that when you give them money or when you invest with them, they will reinvest it into, like, sustainable projects, then if there's no evidence that it has any proper impact or that it actually reduces carbon emissions, then in the end, it's just a lot of talk and there's not a lot of action. And that can lead us to that we cannot reach any of our sustainable goals. And that is a real risk. And that is why now greenwashing in the financial sector is becoming a really important issue. But it's not limited to Europe. I gave an example about a European asset manager, but greenwashing also occurs in Japan. It's not only financial institutions, it's also the companies where investors invest in, where they, for example, buy shares. And that is also very important to bear in mind. I'm sure everyone, like literally almost everyone, has seen this logo. It is the SDG logo. And in Japan, the 17 sustainable development goals, which include, for example, climate action, SDG 13, or for example, affordable and clean energy, SDG 7, or quality education, SDG 4, gender equality, SDG 5. We're more and more familiar with the sustainable development goals. And in Japan, especially, there was even an article in the New York Times. If you come to Japan and you walk in, for example, a metro station, a subway station, you will see a lot of business people wearing this SDG pin. And if you watch a little bit of Japanese TV, you will see tons of politicians wearing this SDG pin. And it's sort of to show to the outside world that one cares about the sustainable development goals, that they care about sustainability. However, it is very important to bear in mind that sometimes what is being said and what is being done, there's a large gap. So for example, Toyota has been named the top ESG brand in Japan in a recent survey based on perception from customers. So Toyota has a very good reputation as a sustainable or ESG aligned ESG company. And then we can see that the CEO or the ex-CEO, he retired a few days ago, but he also wears the small SDG pin on his suit. However, one of the things is that wearing this SDG pin publicly can sometimes be very in a stark or in a strong contrast to what they do in action. Because Toyota, for example, in a recent Green Car report was ranking last because they do a lot of anti-climate lobbying. So they actually try to reduce global regulations that would make cars cleaner. And they have been fined a record fine by the United States regulators for emissions lies. Similar to Volkswagen, they also have been lying about the true extent of their polluting emissions of their cars. So it shows that having a public image can sometimes is not backed up by action. So claiming a lot and showing that you seemingly care about sustainability and actually showing it via your actions can sometimes be very different. And that is very important because it also can prevent innovation, because the EU, for example, is planning to phase out to basically only allow electric vehicles from 2035. So all the new cars sold in the EU should be electric vehicles, or at least hybrid vehicles. So no more traditional diesel or petrol cars. However, Toyota ranks pretty much last among the large car manufacturers in when it comes to the development of electric vehicles. And they even try to resist their own shareholders would tell them that they need to do more. And now very recently, they started a very late push to also catch up to especially Tesla, but also European car manufacturers. And also from other parts, for example, also in China, a lot of electric vehicles are now being developed. So the rest of the world is embracing electric vehicles, but despite advertising the SDGs very publicly and even having a good reputation, it does not show in their actual actions. And the same goes for the risk in the financial sector in Japan, that where sometimes some ESG labels have been labeled misleading. And the regulators had to step in and to say, like, you need to revise your marketing because you're making a lot of promises where we have no evidence that you can, like, keep them in any way possible. So that is also becoming very important right now. And that is why also in Japan now the regulator starts to crack down on greenwashing. So the Financial Service Agency is planning to monitor much more closely greenwashing and what are financial institutions promising that their funds or their investments can achieve. And then we get to another topic, because not only companies or financial institutions do greenwashing, but also people do greenwashing. And that is a very important element, because companies, as I said before, when it comes to capacities, companies sometimes promise that they have a lot of capacities, a lot of resources, also human resources, to do all the things that they say they can do. And it often says that they have a lot of experts, but what exactly is an expert? So I created this term in February 2020, called Competence Greenwashing. And it is the practice of intentional or negligent misrepresentation of knowledge, skills, competence, or expertise relating to sustainability or ESG related activities. And that is very important because, as was found out in a study by NYU, that most US corporate boards, but that is not only US corporate boards, but also in Japan, in Asia, in Europe, they have inadequate expertise when it comes to ESG matters. So when I said before, most of these board members, they have traditional training in management, business, accounting, legal, international relations. And those are not necessarily linked to recent material topics like climate change, biodiversity. If you studied, for example, accounting, you don't become a biodiversity expert overnight. So, but now these companies have to deal with those matters as well, or they try to advertise them, as we saw with the SDG pin. So it is very important to show that a lot of boards, companies do not have that expertise, even though some of them claim that they do. And it is also important other practices, other industries are also affected. For example, those who are supposed to uphold integrity and audit and provide assurance or second opinions about how a company performs in terms of sustainability or ESG, they are even caught cheating in the very areas where they are supposed to monitor companies. And then also in terms when it comes to climate, a lot of consultants have been found to overestimate their own skills, their own capacities, their own competence when it comes to what we call non-financial metrics, such as carbon emissions, or for example, water stress, or for example, deforestation, biodiversity, complex scientific topics where it's not just easy to transition into overnight. And even regulators like the European Banking Authority, they now say that members who advise, for example, financial institutions on ESG risk, they need to have the appropriate knowledge, skills, and expertise concerning ESG risk. Because if you're going to advise someone else, but you do not yourself have those skills, how can you be qualified to advise anyone else? And that is extremely important. But with that, since the market, as I showed before, sustainable investing is growing, ESG is growing, there's now a large demand for specialists, for experts in sustainability, in sustainable investing, in ESG. And with that high demand, that of course creates also pressures for practitioners, for people who want to get employed, or existing managers to also show that they have skills in sustainability, because either they want to get a new job or they want to keep their jobs, or companies want to show that they have a lot of experts internally to manage all those new risks and also seize those new opportunities. And in Asia, that is also the case. There's a war for talent for people with ESG skills. And in Asia also, there's a skills gap. There's not enough people who have those skills currently. And that is important because investors right now, they do not have those skills. They have research teams often who do not have enough experience in those. They mostly focused, they were focused mostly on financial returns. So they didn't really focus on climate change or biodiversity. And then also, many of them, they just use external services without having internal capacity. They just use external data or external ratings to then monitor ESG impact or sustainability performance without actually being able to question or to do their proper analysis themselves. So, and that is also one of the things, because then you become entirely reliant on what someone else gives you. And it can be a large risk, because those ratings also have a lot of issues. And it brings me to the question of, what do we consider an expert? How do you get that if you do not have that? If you have been in the management business, financial sector before, and you do not have a scientific background. So some choose to just create their own trainings and then just label everyone who completes that an ESG expert, as is an example here between a German university and a large consulting firm. That is one way to go about it. Or there's other educational institutions who create certificates, like here, certified expert in sustainable finance by the Frankfurt School of Finance. And then there's a lot of now entering the market from the chartered financial expert, of the CFA Society, which is certified financial advisor. So that is very common for the financial sector, but those institutions now also create certifications for non-financial, for sustainability, where they do not have the traditional expertise in the past, but suddenly they're offering these. And there's this saying by Malcolm Gladwell that it takes 10,000 hours to become a world-class expert in any field. But these schools, they sometimes might be considered to be misleading, because they say within 100 hours, you can become a certified expert. And that is very misleading. And that is where I would be very suspicious of anyone who claims to be an expert in something after 100 hours of self-study. And that is very problematic, because they on their CV or so, it says that they are experts, but are they really experts? Can they really look at complex biodiversity data and say whether a company has a positive impact or a negative impact? That is a very important question. And I wrote an article on competence greenwashing that looked at these issues. And it came out and it analyzes what are, for example, instances of competence greenwashing. So it's when organizations just rebrand existing positions and just add the words ESG, sustainability, climate, or environment to existing job titles. So an analyst becomes an ESG analyst, or manager becomes sustainability manager, or head of risk becomes head of climate risk. That is how it works. You just rebrand existing positions, and then it looks like now you have experts, but all you did is just change the name. Or you basically, they hire people who have a profile, like politicians or so, to be chief sustainability officer, head of sustainability, or someone who was a very good financial investor, now suddenly is head of ESG, or who previously was head of marketing, now is suddenly head of ESG. That is that creates immediate exposure, because people know these are usually names that are known in the industry, but are they really sustainability or ESG experts just because they have been good at something else? I would not say so. Or what they also do, as I mentioned, these certificates. So they basically send their practitioners to do those certificates and then just claim that because after finishing such a certificate, they now are experts. These certificates can be very useful to provide introduction level knowledge around ESG and sustainability, but in 100 hours, you cannot just become a subject matter expert on complex scientific issues like climate change or biodiversity. That is just not possible. Or organizations, especially financial institutions, they often rely on external advisory or consulting firms. But as we saw with some examples that I provided, it is very important that these institutions that provide consulting and advisory services, that they do also have the necessary skills and expertise, and they cannot just create their own experts by creating their own trainings and labeling everyone ESG expert afterwards. So to close today's lesson, I just want to give some recommendations to address competence greenwashing. I created like ESG skill frameworks, and one of the most important one that I want to focus on is the ESG skill materiality matrix. So a skill needs to be material for a certain area, for a certain context. So if I deal with climate change, what I try to do is to create a list of those skills and qualifications and professional expertise that matters the most for a specific issue that either a company or financial institution wants to deal with in the ESG space. This is not a perfect matrix, but it is the first attempt to try to find what skills are actually material, because not all knowledge, that is one of the important part, all knowledge has value, but not all expertise is material or relevant depending on the context. And that is very important to bear in mind. And some of the final to close it today off would be the companies or financial institutions should avoid. They should avoid adding ESG, climate, or sustainability to existing job titles just to make them look green. They should stop creating token sustainability, climate, or ESG positions, often promoting someone remotely related to corporate social responsibility just to respond to market pressures or reputational pressures because clients are now asking for sustainability, or just appointing someone with a big name, but who has barely any experience or expertise in sustainability or ESG. And then recruiting so-called ESG expert who only concluded online introductory ESG certificate courses. They should require or hire real experts to work alongside financial experts or marketing experts. And then creating climate service or ESG sustainability teams that lack disciplinary diversity. Again, it is very important to have both the financial, the management, and business skills, having experts in those areas, but also, since if you are promoting sustainability and ESG, you also need experts that have proper expertise. So for example, if you highlight your biodiversity impacts, you need to have people who have proper, genuine subject matter expertise in your organization. And as a final example, I want to highlight an TCFD report, so climate financial disclosure report from a large asset manager, where they show that suddenly, and this is a public report, publicly accessible, it's part of their public disclosures, they suddenly just highlight that half of their entire board, if you look on the right side, has sustainability expertise, but they do not provide any explanation what kind of expertise that is, why is it relevant to what they do, what is the degree of the expertise? It's just like they know the 17 SDGs, or do they have really deep subject matter expertise? And that can be kind of competence greenwashing, because it makes an organization look competent, but we do as a client or as a customer, we do not really know what actually is the skill now. It just says sustainability, and it shows that half of them supposedly have it. And I will not go too much into it for the final slides, but all these slides basically just mean that all the regulators now, be it in Europe, in the European Banking Authority, the European Central Bank, and in Japan, they are now becoming aware of these skills gaps, and they are more closely looking. For example, as a final slide, in Europe, the European Banking Authority now says that greenwashing can include a misrepresentation about the gaps in skills and expertise, ESG sustainability related expertise, or lack of ESG expertise and skills of market participants. And the FSA published a similar thing that said it is really important to have sufficient expertise on sustainable finance in order to properly execute any sustainable investing. And that is my presentation for today. I thank you very much. I hope it was interesting, and I'm looking forward to your questions. And please do follow up with me if you have further questions that I might not be able to respond to today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Schumacher. Actually, I have a couple of questions, but our time is very limited, so I want to share the questions in the chat. You can see the chat too. But I will read the questions, and maybe you can prepare how to answer them. The first question is from Mr. Sam Christmas. Questions for Dr. Kim. In terms of competence greenwashing, yes, there are lots of short courses that give you expert status. As a business development professional working for RIM sustainability, looking to improve my ESG competence, are there any courses out there that genuinely would improve your expertise that you could recommend?
I think so. The thing is, all of these courses that I showed before, the thing is always, it is always about how do you represent your skills. So all of these courses that I showed before, they have value. They can be useful, and they of course it is better to acquire as much knowledge as possible. However, they're always at the introduction level, and that is the way you need to present it, because a key element is there is no shortcut to expertise, and it is a continuous process, and it's always how you represent. Do you misrepresent or inflate your your acquired skills? Because I'm someone who studied environmental science, but I only covered a very small area of environmental science. So, for example, if I want to do a large research project and it comes to water issues, I am out of my field. I need to work with someone who has those skills. So, to give you an answer, all these courses can have value. Of course, doing a longer course, for example, in sustainability science or in environmental science, for example, a master's or so can be very useful. But if I would need to give you one that is currently on the market that I do think does a decent job, it's not perfect by any means, that would be the GARP SCP or SCR, I think, on climate risk. They cover the scientific basis of climate risk and of climate issues fairly well. Again, it is still introductory, but it's more advanced, and it does cover the basis pretty well. So if that would be one, the GARP SCR certificate provides a decent introduction, more high level than all of these others were really introductory level.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions, so maybe we have to press on. The second one is quite similar to the first one. I would to answer to this question too. What courses, learning materials, certifications, or credentials would you recommend for someone waiting to work in sustainable finance and upskill and effectively avoid competence greenwashing in their work? So do you have anything you would like to add to your answer?
Again, so the thing is, competence greenwashing, again, is greenwashing is only if you misrepresent the level of competence that you have. If you say, I can advise someone on biodiversity, but you didn't do that, then there's no really a shortcut around that. There's a lot of free quality educational offers like MOOCs, for example, EDX, Coursera, they are out there. Then also United Nations has some really good courses. Some development banks, like the Asian Development Bank, offers free introductory courses, or sometimes even a little bit more advanced. So those are quite useful. Even the TCFD has a learning platform where they go a little bit more into depth. So doing all of those gives you always it expands your knowledge. So the more you have, and if you represent it well, if you say I might not be an expert, but I still have a solid basis around that knowledge. So, because expert for me really is a term that creates expectations in our society. And that is where sometimes the misrepresentation element would come. But if you say, I'm really interested in conservation science, or I'm really interested in ecology or biodiversity or ecosystems, then unfortunately there is no shortcut around it. You need to properly go, maybe take a year or so and do a proper course, get the proper education, because there's only so much you can do through your work. Because even if now I am my title changes and I become head of biodiversity or so, but I have no tangible knowledge, and if I rely only on external consultants, that is also problematic, because I always give the example of a maestro, of an orchestra. So a maestro still needs to know music in order to know if someone in his or her orchestra plays the wrong note or plays wrong. So because otherwise they wouldn't know if someone plays the wrong note. Or for example, me, I'm not a doctor. So if someone would give me an X-ray, I don't know what I'm looking at. I would maybe guess, or something might be wrong. That person might have a condition, or might be sick, but I do not know, because I didn't train. I'm not qualified to do that. So if I would be the head of a radiology department and I have no medical training whatsoever, how would I even know if my department is working well? And that is the problem. Previously, it was more financial, but now the more and more we promote sustainability, environmental or climate-related performance, that is where there is unfortunately no shortcut. And that is what would be my answer. So doing a proper master's or education would be the next best thing beyond doing a lot of free good material online. But there's nothing that replaces proper constant exposure to really a topic to get a more specialist expertise.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a lot of questions, so maybe I have to select from them, and maybe you can give us more simpler answers. So the next one is from Efran Tamayo. Thank you, Professor Kim. What is your advice to the rising chief sustainability officers, as well as a way to appoint them and enable their coordination with peers to drive sustainability globally?
That's a good question. And the thing is, even chief sustainability officers, so recently they are getting a pretty bad reputation, because they unfortunately have become more and more like a way to just marketing, PR. So if companies, even if they have very modest how do I say it, performance when it comes to sustainability metrics, like for example reducing carbon emissions, or reducing deforestation in their supply chains, chief sustainability officers have become more like a marketing tool. Like they need to make the modest progress look like a success, and then they wear the SDG pins, they go around, they help create a nice sustainability report that looks nice, but it gives very little actual information. And so as a chief sustainability officer, because many organizations have already a chief operating officer, they already have many people at the executive level that handle business elements. So the chief sustainability officer should really be responsible for fully integrating, measuring, reporting, and making sure that the data is correct. And there it would be very useful, because similar to what I said about the teams, not every chief sustainability officer needs to have the same skills, but it is always, is their skill material to what the company is doing and what the company needs to do to become sustainable? And I think they're a platform between chief sustainability officers to have exchanges, and then also allowing that platform to directly interact with genuine subject matter experts. For example, from environmental science, from social sciences, from those who really do the research, who do the much more in-depth work. That would be a very good way to create a knowledge exchange platform that could be beneficial to everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. And next question is from Naoyuki Yoshino from Keio University. Various rating agencies gave different scores to each company. Each expert may also have different focus on ESG scores. Could it be possible to have I think it's identical definition of ESG scores rather than current diversified definitions. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, I do think so. For example, just to provide a little bit of context, so a lot of companies and financial institutions, similar to like credit ratings for financial performance or like financial risks, they rely on ESG ratings to look at the sustainability or environmental performance of companies or financial institutions. And unfortunately, nowadays, these ratings have very large differences between each other because every ESG rating provider, which often the same that also provide regular financial ratings like S&P, Moody's, or Fitch, those also now have ESG ratings. And those ratings are so different that a company can be either very good in terms of sustainability performance or very bad in sustainability performance, depending on the methodology that each rating agency uses. For example, Tesla could be very good or very bad, depending on the performance. And that is what we saw. So if I'm an investor, I could basically go rating shopping. I could see what is the rating company that provides me with the best or the most favorable rating. And then I'll just use that because then I can still invest in a lot of companies that might not have a good environmental impact. But since that methodology of that rating agency, ESG rating agency, rates all my companies pretty favorable, I can still go and not really change anything in my investment behavior. So having one rating would be very useful. And regulators are becoming more active. So recently, for example, Japan created a code of conduct for ESG data and rating providers so that they should make their methodologies transparent. They should show what kind of data they're using. So they should follow best practice. However, that is a voluntary framework, so they do not have to do that. And what would be very useful is that beyond just aggregating, beyond just looking at all different ratings and taking an average to get like kind of an idea, would be to have a very public and peer-reviewed, transparent ESG rating, and then also knowing where does the data come from. Because if we do not know that, that is also a problem in terms of like seeing how they actually use the data. So it would be very useful, but transparency is the key. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So actually we have two more questions, but we have to end this session because it's a brown bag seminar and we have to use the lunchtime before 1 o'clock. So, but for the questions, unsolved questions, I think we will share these questions to Professor Schumacher. And Professor Schumacher, maybe you can answer these questions via the website of QLOS. And maybe the audience and participant can see his answers over there. And thank you very much, Professor Schumacher. It's actually, I have a lot of questions, but I have no time to ask. Maybe we can talk later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And please reach out if you still have questions, and I will try to respond to all of them, personally.
All right, thank you. So
thank you for joining.
Thank you. So lastly, we have some announcement from Anai-san.
はい、シュマハ先生ありがとうございました。最後に事務局よりご案内させていただきます。まず次回のブラウンバックセミナーのご案内です。次回は来週2月15日水曜日の12時10分より、九州大学法学研究院国際関係法学部門の小島隆教授より、空飛ぶ車は社会に受け入れられる移動手段になれるのかと題し講演を実施いたします。詳細はホームページをご覧ください。